Welcome to the Winged Wheel Podcast. Here to talk all things hockey are your hosts, Brad Crisco, Ryan Hanna, and Evan Lobsinger.
Yeah, this is take two of this opening. I am post-New Orleans trip brain right now. You've both witnessed multiple casualties of that in the 15 minutes you've been in my house. So thank you in advance, both of you, for bearing with me. I'm going to be a bad podcast co-host and a bad friend today.
Well, you already screwed up what will definitely be the best joke I make all night. I have nothing left in the hopper.
Oh, that's because you're unfunny. That's Evan's job to be funny on this podcast.
Yeah, and you ruined the one.
Well, my job here is done.
I thought you were just playing into the joke when Brad originally said it, and then you didn't. You just kept going.
I got it. I got to tell you, New Orleans chews you up and spits you out. I am. There's no depth to anything I'm going to say or think for the next 4 days. So that's your burden to bear now. I certainly can't bear it.
Buckle up.
Lots has happened in the hockey world, which I'm actually really excited to come back and talk about. So welcome back to the Winged Wheel Podcast, folks. I know it's a day later than we usually publish our weekend episode on Monday, but we're excited to be back here to talk to you about all things Detroit Red Wings hockey, the world of the NHL, lots happening in the playoffs, prospects, and plenty more. I am one of your hosts, Ryan Hanna.
I'm Sheldon Keefe's placeholder.
And I'm Evan.
Did you see the Dubas press conference today?
I did not.
He is that one had some weight to it. Anyhow,
Something happened?
Let's talk about it. On this episode of the Winged Wheel Podcast, we're going to be talking a little bit about the makeup of the Red Wings moving forward. This conversation started post-draft lottery in terms of what do the Red Wings need and what's viable to make this a competitive team, because the lottery luck obviously has never and will never go their way. We'll talk about the playoffs and how things have shaken out, and we're also going to do a prospect profile for you today for a player that's going to be relevant for the Red Wings, possibly at either pick, depending on how you feel about this player. He's a little divisive. All of that and lots more. Before we get into that, I want to let you know that this podcast is proudly supported by our Patreon supporters, patreon.com/wingedwheelpodcast. If you want to join the so-called Dub Club, you get a lot of benefits, the Patreon exclusive bonus episodes in which I'll share some stories with you, and we usually kind of let loose, have some fun. I let the guys swear a lot more in that, so it's usually a little bit more animated. You also get access to the Patreon exclusive Discord, as well as automatically being entered into the every giveaway that we do. For example, we gave away 2 tickets to every Red Wings home game this season, the vast majority of them going to our Patreon supporters. Again, that's patreon.com/wingedwheelpodcast. In addition to all that, you also support all of our fundraising and charity work for the Jamie Daniels Foundation, Winged Wheel Podcast Nights at the LCA, growth of the podcast content universe, and launching our new show, Expected by Whom, hosted by Sean Shapiro and Prashant Iyer, all of that. So thank you to our patrons. We are now coming to a acceptance of what the Red Wings are, which is not going to have an Austin Matthews lottery win, not going to have a Connor McDavid lottery win, did not have the Connor Bedard lottery win. So the question is, what's next? Our good friend Max Bultman of The Athletic Detroit wrote a really great piece. It came out today, titled "How the Red Wings Can Build a Stanley Cup Contender Without Superstars." We'll link it in the description of this episode. I really, really, really encourage you to read it. But it's an important question to ask, because until Detroit uncovers a superstar, a true superstar, either in the depths of the draft or someone really overperforms their pick, what do you do? Because at best, let's ask this question. Who on the Red Wings is a superstar or has the potential to be a superstar, and come at this with harsh reality?
This is like the question your professor asks to give you a free mark, to get the brain going, right?
This is like when
if you write your name on this test, you get a free bonus point.
But you know what? It's a hard truth for some fans. This isn't a tough question like it would be for other teams who have
superstars.
That's right.
So to make this point clear, we have to define, what would you classify as a superstar? For a forward, is that, getting Hart votes, not winning, obviously, or being in contention just to be in the top 10 of the ballot? Same thing for defensemen, is that top 10 Norris ballots every couple of years or so? Like, what are the parameters that define superstar? Or is it just kind of what your gut tells you?
I'm kind of a gut feeling kind of guy.
But I think your gut is biased on, points, votes, eye test, all that fun stuff.
Totally. It's comprehensive. Like, there are guys, would you call Nugent Hopkins a superstar?
No.
No.
But he had a 100-point season, and for a lot of people, that would be the benchmark. So I don't think you can attach it to like one static level of production, especially with scoring changing so much in the NHL right now.
All right, so if we're just going by gut about, do I feel like this player has the potential to be one of the best players at his position in the league?
Yes, like a top upper.
Okay.
Like, consider all the tiers that a player falls into. The superstar should be an extra tier above that is just so exclusive, like a dozen or so guys could be in there.
Okay, so if we look at the Red Wings' current roster and in the entire prospect pipeline of all the players in the Red Wings organization, who could fall into that superstar category? For me, that list is Moritz Seider.
Fully agree.
That's the end of the list.
Fully agree.
Yeah, mine, I would also add Dylan Larkin, because when I go, is he a top 32 centerman in the league? I say yes.
Yeah, but that's not a superstar. That's a first-line center. Arizona has a first-line center. So,
yeah, but he's not good.
I mean, this is the harsh reality. And not that I'm saying Dylan Larkin's not good, but Dylan Larkin is not the first-line center on any of the teams left in the playoffs right now.
I wouldn't say Moritz Seider right now is a superstar.
I think he has the potential to be.
I think Dylan Larkin does too.
Dylan Larkin's 27 now?
And every year gets more points.
Okay. No, that's
Like,
fair.
yeah,
It's a
you're-
fair argument. I disagree. I think he's like...
I mean, at the end of the day, we're still, our horse still has two legs and is foaming at the mouth. But
Yeah. I mean, I think this is, for me, the differentiator between star and that word super. Because I think Larkin's a star. He's a
Yes.
first-line center, point-per-game player. He's marketable. He is, you can say right now, definitively the best player on the Red Wings. He is a star. He is not a superstar. I think Moritz Seider is going to get Norris consideration at some point in his career. I don't think Larkin's ever going to get major award consideration in his career.
are we saying superstar right now or
potential to be?
Even potential
okay.
to
Because
be,
you're
so-
if you think Marco Kasper could burst onto the scene and be a superstar, you're allowed to pick him. But to me, the cold reality is in the Red Wings farm system, they have a lot of players who could be top 6 players, maybe one or two guys who could get to that Dylan Larkin level of star category as long shots. But I think the only guy in the entire system, prospector on the roster, who has the potential to be among the best at his position in the NHL is Moritz Seider, and that is it, full stop. I think Marco Kasper, full potential to be a great top 6 forward. Dylan Larkin, number 1 center, no questions, no arguments about that anymore. Lucas Raymond, I think, has a potential to be a really good first-line winger, but I don't think he gets up to top winger in the NHL category. I don't think Simon Edvinsson is going to be a top defenseman in the NHL, even though I think he's going to be a really good top 4 defenseman. Okay, I'll throw one more out there as a long shot, but I'll say the potential's there if you look with a long enough scope. Sebastian Cossa. I don't have the most faith in Sebastian Cossa. I am actually more down on him than the average Red Wings fan tends to be, but I'd be lying to myself if I said the potential wasn't there.
True.
He is still the gigantic athletic freak who's coming off a very promising year he's still in the middle of a playoff race with Toledo. He's done everything in the ECHL this year we would want to see from him. So I can't dismiss that. Again, I know I use this line way too much. Would I put a bet on Sebastian Cossa to be in Vezina consideration one day? I would not, but the potential is there.
There's so much uncertainty around goalies that I can't argue with you that the potential is there. I think the variance on him is insanely high because of position and just what we've seen from him so far.
He never plays a regular game for the Red Wings is also on the table for him. It's the nature of the position, but if we're talking potential, I don't like putting him in this conversation, but I feel like, to be fair, I have to.
So the point of that exercise wasn't to be an indictment on the Red Wings, because all these players that you're probably thinking, well, on the future construction of the team, sure, but those players, like there are a lot of you who are in your car saying, "What about Lucas Raymond? What about Marco Kasper? What about Simon Edvinsson?" Like, first of all, any one of these players could take massive steps, emerge, and actually realize that superstar category. It happens. Like, genuinely, it happens. I don't want to say often, but you can't rule it out. And every year, someone in the league is going to surprise you in terms of how much they elevate their game.
But for that to happen, something is going to have to fundamentally change about who they are as a player.
Which is part of
which
growth.
has happened. I mean, not that he'll ever be a superstar, but Michael Rasmussen's skating, when we wrote him off and we said, here's what his potential could be at this point, nobody foresaw that dramatic improvement in his skating. Nobody. And that happens so rarely. Because like right now we're sitting here and am I going, could Lucas Raymond be a really, really good player? Yeah. A superstar? No. But if all of a sudden Lucas Raymond comes to camp next year and he makes a Michael Rasmussen level jump in his skating, oh yeah, Lucas Raymond's got superstar potential. But those circumstances happen so rarely that we can't in good faith include that in this conversation. But yeah, it's a good point to acknowledge. It could happen. But we have to ignore it for the sake of this conversation because it's not likely.
And you can't bank on it.
Exactly.
It's like banking on winning the draft lottery.
Exactly.
So if those of you who have, angry or even just like,
we take 5 days off and we just come back and throw water in people's face.
But for those of you who are advocating for these players, it's a good indication of the Red Wings are starting to build a really solid foundation of really good players. Some are in the really good category. Some are in the star category. But the thing that we talk about and folks who talk about, building Stanley Cup competitors is you're driven by superstars more and more in this league as it evolves. The Red Wings haven't had that yet. So how do you move forward? What I really liked about Max's article is the comparisons he drew to Carolina. And he goes a lot more into some really good visualization statistics in depth. So that'll be really interesting for you to read. But Carolina is a team where I think there's some players who at some point in their careers could make an argument to be in that superstar tier. And they're definitely way more fleshed out. Obviously, they're in the conference finals than the Red Wings are. But that is a collection of star players, a collection of really good players that is making noise year after year. And especially this year, like trouncing other teams in the playoffs. So is that Detroit's model moving forward?
It has to be. They don't have another option. That's the reality of it. But if you want to look player to player, Carolina to Detroit, yeah, there are some lines to be drawn. Are Sebastian Aho and Dylan Larkin all that different? No. Could Lucas Raymond become Marty Necas? Yes. And those are Carolina's top two scorers in the playoffs right now. The big difference between Carolina and Detroit right now in terms of stars is Carolina has three established stars on defense: Jacob Slavin, Brett Pesce, and Brent Burns. Now, I know Slavin and Pesce aren't household names, but they are stars. They are legitimately great players. Now, Seider is very much in their tier already. Maybe not Slavin's or Burns, but yeah, Seider to Pesce, I'd say he's ahead of Pesce. So what the Red Wings need is they need Edvinsson and Walman to become Pesce and Burns and Seider to get to that Slavin level, which I think is all possible. Again, is it likely? No, but this is actually one of those, pie in the sky things that I don't think is terribly unreasonable. I think Walman, with a little more improvement, could get to that level. I think Seider, like I said, could very much get to Slavin's level, if not eclipse it. And I think Edvinsson could get to the Pesce level as well. The big difference between Carolina, and I'm so happy Max pointed this out because it's the harshest reality of the statement, is you can't have this lack of stars at the top, like superstars, and have, negative value players in your lineup. And he used goals above replacement as the metric to compare, which is probably a really good one to use for this example. Carolina had one negative goals above replacement player this season. Detroit had 7. You cannot have those boat anchors on your team, because if you are, Dallas right now, Yanni Hakanpää and Esa Lindell are getting caved these playoffs. You can cancel that out when you have a Jason Robertson, a Rupe Hintz, and a Miro Heiskanen playing at those levels. And that's the point. The Red Wings right now don't and won't have that. So they have to be perfect. And I mean almost literally perfect in building out the bottom of this roster, because you need to bring value from all four lines, which is how Seattle's succeeding on the other side of the aisle from Dallas right now. Because they also are built in the model that Detroit wants to be. Now, expansion team versus this. Some things about how Seattle is built right now are unrealistic for Detroit, but that is how they are doing it. They are just killing Dallas in waves.
Yeah.
So, yeah, sure, whatever line's playing against Heiskanen that night's not doing anything, but whatever line they're throwing out against Dallas's bottom pair can absolutely cave them. Do you think if you threw out a line right now of Pius Suter, Joe Veleno, and I don't know, whoever is going to cave anybody in the league right now? No.
No, the best you can hope is that line stays afloat and gives you some mismatched depth scoring.
Yeah, and every, maybe 30 goals a year they contribute in, but that's not a recipe for success. And I'm going to make another point here before I let you jump in, because we talked about it at length for Detroit this season, and I think especially when it comes down to playoff hockey, and I know Merrick and Friedman talk about this a lot, Detroit doesn't have enough pricks on their team. Teams have to hate playing against you. So if you're going to be devoid of superstars, if you're going to be deep top to bottom, you're going to be an ultra defensive team, because that's what Detroit's going to have to do. You have to be everyone on that roster has to be an absolute pain in the ass to play against.
You need to be disruptive.
Which involves a lot of foot speed.
Yeah.
Which the Red Wings do not have.
Yeah. And when someone irritates you, you have to swarm them like a bunch of honey badgers. You're going to take penalties, for all, as overboard as Michael Bunting goes, the Red Wings don't have anybody like that. You look at even the top players on a Tampa Bay, for example, or a Florida. Matthew Tkachuk, he's a prick. Nikita Kucherov, he's a prick. Dylan Larkin, he's a prick on the ice. This is what you need. Great guys off the ice, all of them. But you need to be deep, flawless, and unbelievably difficult to play against. And do the Red Wings check any of those boxes right now?
As a whole, no. Flat out, no.
Well, we wouldn't be seventh in the division if we did.
Yeah.
No. You love calling out that seventh in the division purely because you nailed that prediction.
Probably because it might happen again next year.
Evan, can you please wait until September?
No spoilers just yet.
Brad, a few of the points you talked there. One is that the Red Wings still have a bunch of negative, impact players. The funny thing is, this team is still in a way better spot than they were previously. Like, they are actually trending in the right direction on removing below replacement level players. Like, they have gotten better addition by subtraction. I know the results that Evan just talked about, seventh in the division, the overall points increase didn't end up where it needed to be this year, but still, anyone who's watched the entirety of the Red Wings season, they can see this team is slowly getting better, much closer to competing this year than they were in the past. But they have a lot of work to do. One thing that I really like about Carolina, and I wish this wasn't the direction Detroit had to go, because it's hard to do, but it's worked well for Carolina, even in their disappointing years, even in years where they, faltered in the playoffs early, whatever. They had a foundation of really, really rock solid defense. You talked about the players just now, Brad. That shelters your goalie. It gives your forwards the luxury of having an off night. It just allows you to go out there and gives you a chance to win in a lot of different ways, either through blowout or low scoring game. Your goalies can be rusty. They can come in cold. A rock solid defense is how Carolina has stayed, above average at worst for a long, long time. And that sucks because two things. One, it's a little boring, and I say that. I don't know if you know, but I used to play defense.
No, I didn't.
Yeah, so it's as much as I advocate for really good defense, it's not really the way the league's trending. The talent pool is thinner and thinner every year, especially now that we're at 32 teams. And it's hard to get everyday top four defensemen. It flat out is. It's not a sexy way to draft. It's not an exciting way to develop players. You have to have more patience with defense. But Carolina, with those players, that's what they have. So I think Max nailed it, and I think you nailed it, Brad. Detroit really needs to bring that in, because the scoring is going to have to improve by the players they have now improving. They're going to have to get fortunate in the draft, and they're going to have to continue to take smaller steps because they're not going to get that big swing from a superstar.
Yeah, and it's unfair to put it on the players, but for that to happen, a lot of the prospects that are in the pipeline, in order for this team, built as it is, lack of superstars, to be cup contenders, Marco Kasper has to hit. And I'm not saying he has to become a superstar. He has to be at least what his draft projection said he would be.
He should be.
He can't come short of that.
He needs to be on this Red Wings team a really good second line center.
Yeah.
NHL average middle six, but on this Red Wings team, if Dylan Larkin is the only center that's challenging him for a top six center spot, he has to be a really good, impactful, piss you off and still produce second line center.
Yeah. Like a lot of the guys that we are projecting in the Red Wings system now, beyond Kasper, have to hit. Edvinsson no longer is a luxury. He has to be a top four defenseman with an exclamation mark. Carter Mazur has to come in and be a productive middle six scoring winger. Elmer Soderblom has to come in and be a productive third line scoring winger. Like, for the Red Wings to be good, these prospects have to come in and start taking the jobs of these negative value players. And, we could sit here and ramble off doesn't matter. Pick whoever you want.
The old Mike Babcock list.
If you think they're a negative value player, they probably are. And Mazur, Soderblom, Edvinsson, they have to start taking jobs.
Yep.
That's the reality of it, and they have to be good enough to do it. And, are they going to hit on all of them? No. But, hey, they have 4 first-round picks in the next couple of years. That gives them some options to, I know over 7 years we're sick of this term. That's 4 more darts. And that doesn't necessarily have to be a dart as in a pick. There are players available for trade out there. That could also be the solution.
And I've said time and time again, I think trade, especially if you're looking across 2 years, one of those premium picks between the first and second round of this year and next year's draft are going to be moved in a trade for a ready now NHL player, if not more than one of those picks. Now, one last thing I want to say is thinking about this makes me a lot more open to going forward defense if the Red Wings are going to make their 2 picks as they are in this draft. Because, like I just advocated for, they need a rock-solid defensive group, and they have players who could do it, but, man, if you really have 6 defensemen who are impactful NHL players, where there's a guy on the third pairing who would be second pairing on a lot of other teams in the NHL or whoever it might be, I'm very open to moving in that direction if they really believe in a Simashev or Axel Sandin Pellikka or whoever it might be. Like, I'm a lot more open to a defenseman because you need, again, that backstop, that foundation. I know it's not fun, and I know you hate me, Brad, for that, but I just want to put that out there. Thinking about that makes me a lot more open to that concept and not just shooting for high scoring with both picks.
So this might shock you a little bit, but it's a very specific circumstance that I'm going to reference here. There is a scenario where I think I might actually advocate for taking a defenseman at number 9.
Oh, my God.
It's a very... So, pick 6, 7, 8 are the 3 USNTDP guys.
Yep.
If that happens, obviously our top 3 targets there are gone. And now, depending on how you feel about Dvorsky, this could sway your opinion one way or another. Again, I still lean forward here, but there are a lot of intriguing forwards who are going to be available at 17. They're going to be gambles, but they're going to be intriguing, like a Cal Ritchie, a Matthew Wood. There's about 3 or 4 other guys that are going to be in that mix there. Hell, even some mocks have had Oliver Moore falling that far. That make you think maybe 17 is the place to take a forward. Boy, do I keep looking at this Red Wings system and going, there is nobody like Sandin Pellikka here. There is nobody. They need offense, and they need it from the offense and the back end badly. Sandin Pellikka solves one really big problem. He shoots right, and he can quarterback power play.
When you were walking in, Evan, did you see a pig fly over the house? Or
No, I didn't.
Now, if my scenario breaks down the way it does, I still probably prefer Dvorsky.
Yeah.
But again, depending on how high you are on the forwards that should be available around 17, that could really change your opinion on how this breaks down.
There's also a chance he's not even there at 9.
I would bet he's not.
Well,
maybe Reinbacher, but yeah.
I think Reinbacher is gone before Sandin Pellikka, and I think Ryan Bacher's gone before Detroit makes any pick. Now, which in my scenario doesn't matter because then one of the USNTDB guys is sitting there at 9, and I'm going to do that 10 out of 10 times if I'm the GM. Because you have the almost exactly what the Red Wings need forward in Ryan Leonard, who could fall. You have the guy who might be the most purely gifted offensive player outside the top 5 in this draft with Gabe Perreault. So am I passing up one of them to take a chance on a small defenseman? Probably not. I'm probably just taking those. And like I said, I'm still probably leaning, Dvorsky or Moore or whoever over Sandin Pellikka. But it's a circumstance that's definitely worth thinking about at this point.
Anyhow, this has all been a really good, it's a good primer for what Detroit's construction has to be based on what we talked about today and what we mentioned directly post-draft lottery, which was, this is the Red Wings' reality now, and they simultaneously need to get better and need to get out of sucking and having us have to care about draft lotteries. But, we would love to not have an annual draft lottery live stream. Like, how sad of a statement is that? This is how we have to start to consider what the Red Wings and Steve Yzerman need to do for Hockeytown to slowly improve. A lot more to come. This is going to be the theme of the roster discussions and construction discussions for this team for months, if not years ahead. Let's jump into a player that is going to be relevant for the Red Wings. Some say at pick 17, some say at pick 9, others say shouldn't be for either, but Nate Danielson is a very relevant prospect because of what he brings to the ice, the kind of game he plays, and the position he plays. Center for the Brandon Wheat Kings in the WHL, all-around, well-rounded player. Is he a guy that the Red Wings should look at? Who is Nate Danielson as a prospect?
Poor man's Oliver Moore. At least that's my opinion of him.
Which isn't a bad
thing. No, for all the reasons we like Oliver Moore is all the reasons we like Nate Danielson. He's a big center who can skate really well, not to the level of Oliver Moore, but can skate really, really well. Full 200-foot player, well-rounded game. The question with Danielson is, what is his ceiling? In my opinion, it's not very high. He's an 04 birthday. He's a late birthday. He is finishing up his 3rd year in the WHL, and his production is not where you would want it to be for a first-round pick if you are looking for any offensive upside. He's over a point per game, but not by a ton. He is playing on a very weak Brandon team, which is worth mentioning because that obviously is hindering him a little bit. His game tends to feel a little too simple at times. Like it just looks like he lacks that creativity in his game. He's not devoid of offense, so I every time I make points like this, I feel like I'm oversimplifying it. It's there. He can produce, but he produces mainly by his speed and size. Like he's not often making super creative plays that lead to offense. A lot of the questions I had about Quinton Byfield, I have about Nate Danielson, but obviously two very different degrees.
Yeah.
So don't say that's a 1-to-1 comparison, but we've seen the struggles Byfield have had, and those concerns I had have come to fruition with Byfield. And for a lot of the same reasons, I have a lot of questions about Nate Danielson. So, I don't hate the player. He's actually a guy I would love on the Red Wings just because of the type of guy he is, the type of player he is, how responsible he is, how fast he is. A lot of what he is what the Red Wings desperately need. To me, though, his upside isn't worth a first-round pick. Just plain and simple.
Oh, not a first-round pick.
Late first, sure. So in reality, what do I think Nate Danielson is? I think he's going to be Joe Veleno. So I love Joe Veleno. Would I take Joe Veleno at 9 or 17 in this current draft as he is now? Absolutely not. Would I take Joe Veleno again where the Red Wings picked Joe Veleno? 100 out of 100 times. Absolutely. So I'm applying that same logic to Nate Danielson because I would love him on the Red Wings. And if they want to trade up from one of their high second-round picks to jump back into the 20s potentially to get Danielson, fully on board for that. I don't know if he's worth a trade up, but that's the range I would pick him.
I fully agree with you in that his ceiling is a question. If you think there's an untapped level of offense in there, and playing on a weak Wheat Kings team hampered that, and you think he could be a true top 6 production level center, you take him at 9th overall and you laugh while you're doing it. He plays a complete game, 200 foot. It doesn't come at the cost of skating. He goes through the hard areas of the ice. He's able to actually, produce on offense. Like, he has an offensive aspect to this game. He already plays a mature 200-foot game, so I think he projects as a center. Good size. And if you think there's an elevation of offense there, absolutely. I agree with you, though. The ceiling is the question. Being an overager calls that further into question. So you're wondering, is the production that we've seen so far from him in the WHL because of being an overager, or at least partially aided by it? I mean, I think it's fair to consider. But yeah, I think, poor man's Oliver Moore is not at all a bad way to qualify him. He's a player I would be comfortable with the Red Wings taking at 17, even if you think he's only going to be a middle 6 guy or a not really productive second line center, but one who can contribute in other ways. His game is, I don't want to call it safe as in it's boring and it's limited, but I think safe is a good word to put out there.
He's going to be an NHLer. That's what I will say about Danielson in the highest compliment I can give him. His game is so well-rounded, and his speed is so good that I struggle to see a reality where he's not an everyday NHLer. My projection for him is a third-line center at best. Like, at best. If you want this type of player, I have a hard time talking myself into Nate Danielson when Oliver Moore's there, because Oliver Moore is better.
I agree. I'm in the same boat.
Yeah, Oliver Moore is better at just about everything. Not by much, but he's better at everything. So he's a little more creative. He's faster. Like, his 200-foot game is a little more well-refined. So it's like, I have a hard time talking myself into that player, especially too when you get to pick 17. You have to bring up the question, what does Detroit need? Because for me, what the Red Wings need right now, I'd rather gamble on Cal Ritchie at that point, because I feel like there is a higher ceiling there. I feel like there is more untapped, because they're in very similar situations in the CHL. They are both top-line centers, leaders. They both wear letters, which is worth talking about, because Nate Danielson is the captain of the Brandon Wheat Kings. So Red Wings like their character guys. That's a huge plus. But I feel like the creativity is there for Cal Ritchie where it is not for Nate Danielson. So if you're talking ceilings, even if you're taking a long shot middle 6 center, he's not the guy I'm taking.
What else is there left to say?
Yeah, there it is.
No, I agree. From the looks I've had of him, like, he's a middle 6 forward, likely. He's got a lot of great tools to, he's certainly going to play in the NHL. It's just, how high does it go? And with everything you guys said, I don't see someone with elite scoring talent that would push him up the depth chart. So, I mean, a lot of teams like those kinds of picks, though. They like those certainty guys who they can just get into the lineup and have a long career with.
Yeah, the Red Wings do. They've picked a ton of players in this mold.
Yeah.
Like, my God, they had Marco Kasper last year.
Is he a viable pick 17 for you, Evan?
I wouldn't be upset with it.
That's kind of where I'm at. I don't. The Ritchie point is really good, though, Brad. That's making me think, like, you're kind of assuming the same risk, but the reward is potentially a lot higher. But yeah, he plays an Yzerman style game, 200 foot, responsible, good size. The drive is there, like that. He will be an attractive player for the Red Wings. I'll say, based on what the Red Wings like ignore what we like. I think he is an option for Detroit at 9. I would, just based on what we know of the Red Wings and the kind of game he plays, he has to be in the conversation for them.
So I'm gonna get killed for saying this, but there's one previous Red Wings draft, and this is in a different administration, but I'm getting the same vibes right now, where you like the player, you don't like the player at 9. And I can say at 9 because it's the same damn circumstance.
We've all been thinking it.
I had both these players rated in the 20s. Big CHL player who dominated, and you weren't sure if it was because of his size or his skill. Anyways, big Michael Rasmussen vibes with Nate Danielson and the Red Wings at 9. Because I agree with you. I can absolutely see the Red Wings doing this because he is absolutely the Red Wings type.
I both want to say, all of you who have your Brad bingo board, check off compares player to Michael Rasmussen, but I also agree with you, so I can't make fun of you too much here. I think it's the same kind of risk. That said, I I wonder if there is that offensive pool of talent there where he can really step it up. Nate Danielson could be the biggest steal at 9 or past the, bonafide top 4 or 5 in the entire draft. So it just depends on how you think about him. If he was, if teams really did think that he had that in him, I don't see him going past like 6 or 7 based on what he's bringing to the table.
Yeah, and for all of you who are yelling at your speakers right now going, but we love Rasmussen now. You're right. We do. And every single person listening to this right now, if they could redraft 2017, they're taking Nichash or Suzuki and not Rasmussen. Like, don't even lie to me. No, not one Red Wings fan alive is taking him at 9 again.
Yeah. There are draft boards that could fall in certain ways where at pick 17, I'm thinking Nate Danielson is not only an acceptable pick, but probably one of the better ones. And it would have to go pretty unfavorably for Detroit in terms of our perspective, but, no Oliver Moore, none of the defense are there. Obviously, Dvorsky's off the board. That's talking about pick 9. But
yeah, Matthew Wood is off the board. Cal Ritchie's off the board.
Yeah.
Basically, those similarly talented players, but with higher offensive upside, are gone.
Exactly. So he's an option. I think he's one of the players I'm going to be watching more just to see if we missed a trick with him or we're thinking too low of him. I think Corey Pronman has him. He thinks very favorably of him. So the variance on Danielson is high. So he's a player who you could see either rise or fall pretty drastically.
Danielson's the classic example of the public rankings are going to be very different than what the NHL rankings are going to be. Because, again, he's a guy NHL teams are going to look at very favorably, whereas the public rankings probably not so much. And the true ranking is somewhere in between.
Yeah, I think in January, Bob McKenzie had him mid first round, like around pick 15, which is about what we're talking about right now. So, and he didn't factor into the top 12 of the most recent ranking. So the NHL internal scouting opinion seems to have Danielson as a mid-round prospect. So that's our prospect profile on Nate Danielson. These are going to come at you hot and heavy between now and the draft. So the bigger names especially. So stay tuned for all of that and how it evolves. Lots of questions to come for Detroit, especially because now we know their second first-round pick has moved up from pick 18 to pick 17. So it's a pick that originally belonged to the New York Islanders. It went to the Vancouver Canucks in the Bo Horvat trade. Detroit acquired it from the Canucks in the Filip Hronek trade. And based on how the draft orders decided and all the calculations that goes into when playoff teams get eliminated, et cetera, Florida advancing to the conference finals meant that the Islanders, which is now Red Wings, moved up from pick 18 to 17. So Detroit now holds in the 2023 NHL draft picks 9 and 17. Let's talk about who lost to make that happen. The gentleman's sweep, the Toronto Maple Leafs lost in 5 games to the Florida Panthers. They did end up taking a game. They won their first second-round game in nearly 2 decades, but Florida got it done in overtime in front of the crowd in Toronto because, of course, they did. That series is over, and it's only one of the shockers so far. Shocker, depending on what you think. But first of all, Florida, what a run. Secondly, Toronto, what now?
Well, Florida, the state of Florida right now, come on, the Miami Heat and the Florida Panthers, you get 2 8th seeds going to the conference final on the same day. It's just not fair.
That is like professional sports owners' dreams, that happening.
We don't have to spend all that money and we can continue on in the playoffs.
Incredible.
This is why fringy playoff teams load up at the deadline, because they think they can be Florida, even though this is a team 1 year removed from a President's Trophy. And
Sergei Bobrovsky has remembered how to play at an elite level out of nowhere.
Yes.
And all they needed was Matthew Tkachuk to play at a Hart level for an entire season plus 2 playoff rounds. Like, just very reasonable things needed to happen. Oh, and their opponent that they were playing in the second round just completely looked disinterested and not involved at all in the second round. Just the perfect circumstance.
This is why, and I'm going to connect this to Edmonton right now. Winning the Stanley Cup is just as much about timing as it is talent. Florida got hot at the right time, especially with the other teams who could have They could have delivered a killing blow. They had the opportunity to keep Florida out, and they just kept losing. Pittsburgh just completely fumbled the bag.
They screwed it for everybody.
They absolutely did. And Florida got hot at the right time. They figured their shit out at the right time. Bobrovsky coming in changes things. And the Bobrovsky point is something that I don't know how teams look at that and still stick with a regular season starter who's floundering in the playoffs, who's screwing them. Look, Stuart Skinner in Edmonton had a great season, and he was their best chance going in. They gave him 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. How many chances to keep that net? How many poor performances did he put in? Campbell came in, and it was over 48 saves or something like that. It wasn't a big sample, but he was good. The playoffs are all about vibes, your streakiness, and how much confidence your team has in the goalie. I don't care if Campbell was one of the worst performing, biggest head case goalies in the league all season. If he is getting hot at the time, you have to go to him. Boston went to Swayman too late. Edmonton didn't lean on Campbell when Skinner wasn't doing it for them. Florida has Bobrovsky, and he's been getting it done for them. And they made that switch, and they stayed with it. They didn't galaxy brain it by going back to Lyon. And here they are in the conference finals. I don't know why, and I know I just pulled us away from the Florida-Toronto, but I don't know why these other teams like Boston and Edmonton are so attached to these goalies. Prashant said this great. We've seen Dominik Hasek lose his net in the playoffs. If he can, the greatest goalie of all time, for my money, anybody can, and they should. It's your responsibility as a coach to give your team the best chance to win every night. Even if this goalie is only going to be good for a dozen games, those dozen games could see you lifting the greatest trophy in sports at the end of it.
What if I told you that those coaches did think that they were doing the best thing to make their team win that, or giving their team the best chance to win that evening?
That's what makes this league beautiful. Mistakes.
And here we are with no Canadian teams left.
Hey, Vegas has the most Canadians in the NHL, I'm pretty sure. So
hell yeah.
That's the if you're a fan of just Canadians winning the cup, Vegas is your team. Congratulations.
Well, Evan gets to reference 7th in the division all the time. I want to point out that before the playoffs, I said nobody was talking about Vegas, and everybody should have been talking about Vegas, and here we are with them in the conference final.
As a Jack Eichel truther, I am very smug right now.
I think I read somewhere today that he's the betting favorite for the Conn Smythe right now.
I saw a lot of plus 700s on him.
Based on the teams that are in,
yeah, Carolina, who would it be right now? Burns, maybe?
I think Burns is he's a sneaky good vote, too. If they win the cup.
Tkachuk and Bobrovsky.
For Florida, yeah.
Jack Eichel.
We'll see what happens. We're recording this before Game 7 of Seattle-Dallas, which has been a phenomenal series. But
yeah, Seattle has no obvious candidates. Dallas...
Wyatt
Hintz?
Johnson.
No. Isn't Rupe Hintz... Well, he was tied for the playoff scoring lead before McDavid overtook him yesterday, I believe.
Yeah, McDavid's at 20, Rupe Hintz at 18, tied with Leonard Draisaitl. And then the last remaining player, or the next best remaining player is Matthew Tkachuk at 16. And then Jack Eichel with 14. Everything is up for grabs, including the cup, including the Conn Smythe. With Toronto now, Dubas had his press conference, and his contract has expired. Toronto didn't extend him. They won the series. I do think he secured his job if he wants it. But in his presser, he referenced a lot of, I need to do what's right for my family. It seemed to have been a very tough year for them. And as I was watching it, I went, oh, he's squeezing them because he knows Pittsburgh wants him, and he wants a big payday. But then he went on to say, I'm not interested in going out anywhere else. It's either this or nothing. And if you're negotiating a contract, you don't really say that. It could be true, but you would rather negotiate with another team making offers on the table. I don't think he burned himself. He'll still be able to get a lot of money from Toronto, but I think that's real. The trials and tribulations of working in Toronto, that pressure has to be insane. So
there's a dollar amount associated with having to be the GM of Toronto or the coach.
100%. You lose your sanity.
Yeah, it costs more to be in those positions.
And it also costs more to live in Toronto. That place is ludicrously priced.
Have you seen that guy who's been doing TikTok videos? Canadian housing versus literal European castles?
Oh, yes. Hilarious account.
My favorite trend. It's so fun. He did one in Kitchener, and then that house burned down a week later. Anyways. Yep. Just
coincidence? I think not.
Yep. Just throwing it out there.
Dubas is in question. Is he going to return? You have everyone looking at their core 4 players. What's going to happen with them? Matthews is coming up to expiry. Nylander, is he the player who's on the outs? Because, if you want to keep Matthews and Marner and you have Tavares, is he going to be on the market and he's going to have a heavy market? Do you let him go? Do you trade him this offseason with one season left at a very good contract? Like, what do you do? Toronto, do they blow it up now?
No. Like I said in that intro, we couldn't run. Tires will be kicked. The funny thing with Nylander is he's probably got the worst rep of the core 4, and yet he's been the most consistent playoff producer for them.
He was such a gamer these playoffs.
Yeah.
If you're a Leaf fan looking at Nylander and saying he's part of the issue, like, I'm sorry.
You're an idiot.
You're not watching these games.
You're an idiot.
Yeah, he gets kicked the most, and I hate the Leafs, but I am such a William Nylander truther. He's only got 1 year on his contract, left on his contract. Otherwise, I'd be banging the table for Detroit to be trading for him. But he's a pending UFA next summer, so there's that crux of it. I don't know. Toronto's got a very interesting scenario ahead of them because, I believe in talent and I believe in building a team the way Toronto's building the team, where we just had this long conversation about how the Red Wings can win with depth, but they have to because they don't have another option. You look at the teams that are like Tampa, who's been sustainably successful. They have, their core 4, whatever you want to call it, of 8, 9, 10, $11 million players. But the one thing I've alluded to this episode and a lot in the past that I think Toronto's lacking, and I think just has to become a fundamental change with, Matthews and Marner specifically, you got to be a prick. Like the whole playoffs, it's so random, but I know we talked about it on the podcast and it kept jumping into my mind. You remember that scenario in the regular season where the Leafs were playing Philly?
Oh, of course.
And Travis Konechny and Austin Matthews got into it.
Yeah.
And Matthews was just standing there laughing while all his teammates were fighting for him.
Yes.
I couldn't shake that image in the whole playoffs. I'm not saying that you can't win with Matthews and Marner. You can, but they have to learn to do what Braden Point and Nikita Kucherov and Brad Marchand and all these other superstars on top teams and Matthew Tkachuk do, which is we are going to run up the score on you. We are going to put a ton of points in, and we're going to punch you in the face, and we're going to cross-check you when nobody's looking, and we're going to chirp you all game, and we're going to be actual dickheads on the ice.
Well, there was
and the Leafs core 4 doesn't do that, and they have to.
There was a moment, I think, at the end of Game 4 where Matthew Tkachuk was basically giving Marner like jersey jabs, and he's just standing there taking them while looking at the ref like he thinks the ref's going to call a penalty. Like, you got to. It reminded me of the Sedin. Moment.
Yes, Marchand and Sedin in the finals.
And it's like, the refs aren't going to call anything, man. Like, the game's over.
Yeah.
Like, the game is over. They don't call anything ever anyway. That makes sense. So stand up for yourself. Like, show that you've got some character and some fight and some bite.
Yeah.
Like, that stuff drives me nuts. Like, I know in minor hockey they always say just like let it go and all that stuff, and like that is what it is, but like this was their punk test.
This is the NHL. You got to punch someone in the face when someone needs to be punched in the face. And I know I'm opening my boomer window here, and it sounds like I'm saying this is the only reason the Leafs lost. I'm not saying that. The Leafs core 4 also need to adapt their game and learn to score in different ways when games go certain ways.
They get stifled for 3-4 game stretches all too often.
Yes, and if you can't score a typical Austin Matthews goal, well, Austin Matthews has to learn to score a goal like Matthew Tkachuk scores a goal. Like, you just have to. You look at Stamkos, and we know his threat from the same areas Matthews traditionally scores, but guess what? Stamkos finds ways to get goals in other ways when that option is taken away from him, and the Leafs haven't done that yet. And I'm not saying the Leafs should give up on this, because we've seen time and time again players adapt and eventually get over the hump. And like,
well, the clock's ticking.
Yeah, it is ticking. But I mean, Tampa was that team forever that couldn't win. And then, for a lot of the same narratives the Leafs have now, and then eventually they adapted, got it done. Washington, same thing. St. Louis, same thing. Like, it can be done, but there are also the other examples. San Jose never did. Like, so. And
it's so hard to tell when you watch the press conferences with guys like Matthews and Marner. Like, I'm not getting any vibe that I'm sure they do want to overcome it because they are ultimate competitors and pro athletes, but I don't get the same. And Steven Stamkos goes up to the mic and his body is broken and he says, like, we need to be better and we need to learn how to win. I believe him.
Yeah.
When Matthews and Marner say it, I don't get that same feeling.
I think you guys are right in that they need to do these things differently. They need to adapt. They need to be, add a little sandpaper. And it's not just all about sandpaper. They need to score in different ways. They need to adjust to the way, if a team is going to bring a Matthew Tkachuk game to them, then they need to respond in a certain way while still having that skill edge. If you're Toronto, I think you've hit your head against the same wall too many times. And I disagree, Brad. I don't think you blow it up as in.
Oh, I'm not saying don't do anything, but I'm not saying you blow it up for the sake of blowing it up. You explore the right trade. Down Goes Brown had a really good article about this. He's saying, you know what Florida did last year after their massively disappointing season? They didn't stand in a mic and say, we're going to run it back and everything's going to be fine and we believe in these guys. They went out and made one of the biggest trades in recent hockey history, and it worked out well for them.
Yeah.
There could be, we talk about Kyle Connor all the time for Detroit. Maybe that's an option for Toronto. Maybe they look at, money out, money in.
Yeah,
like they're
looking at their cap chart, like it's not lined up favorably. They're going to have to get creative. Who's coming up first at the end of 24-25? Matthews and Nylander. Those players, like it or not, they're going to get raises. In the case of Nylander, a big raise. In the case of Matthews, he's going to rise with the cap. Who comes off in 25-26? Marner, he'll get a raise too. Maybe not as significant. He's not going to sign an extension this year. Tavares, well, he might. I don't know. Tavares, $11 million off the books. If they could swap Tavares and Matthews, they would give up an arm and a leg to do that. Because I think if you're Toronto, you want to bring Tavares back at a pittance. You bring him back at a price that's reflective of, hey, we overpaid you for all these years. Now give a little bit back and help us win a cup. But it's just not the way it's going to be. If I'm Toronto, I'm thinking, who wants to pay a premium for Willie Nylander? And can you get some premium draft picks or players who are younger on better cost-controlled deals? And you honestly explore what you can get from Mitch Marner. I don't think either of those guys are necessarily the problem. I think in terms of playoff performers, Marner did better this postseason. Nylander obviously loved his game this postseason. But if you're Toronto, you have to consider massive moves.
You have to look at every option. But again, you don't make this a trade for the sake of making a trade. Because I use the Florida example, but that's not a one-to-one. They acquired the best player in that trade, and they moved out two core pieces to do that.
Yeah.
If the Leafs are trading Matthews, Marner, and Nylander, I don't see a trade available out there where they are getting the best player in return. Like, they will have to get mega creative on that. And
you have to keep Matthews. You have to.
But by July 1st, if they don't think he's going to sign an extension with them, they have to trade him. They have to. He is way too valuable to just let walk for nothing. We had this conversation about Larkin.
Yeah.
This is Larkin plus. Like, you can't lose him for nothing. And the thing with Matthews is he's so good, you can get some very good now players in return, but I still don't see the Leafs winning that trade.
Because trades of that magnitude don't happen in this league. Like, no. LeBron James doesn't, there's no LeBron James moves across teams. There's no, we traded 17 first-round picks and 3, starting on the floor players. It just doesn't happen in the NHL.
Not to sort of railroad this conversation, but do you think Edmonton is in a worse scenario than Toronto is right now?
I was just going to segue us there. I don't think they're in a worse scenario, but it could be, immediately, but it could be more dire at the end of it, if that makes sense.
No, Edmonton's in a way better place than...
They're in a better place right now.
Draisaitl's got 2 years left. McDavid's got 3 years left, if I'm remembering this correct. They have time. The Leafs don't, because as of right now, they have one more year of Matthews and Nylander. That's 2 of their core pieces. They have 1 more year left. Now...
Okay, but that you're right in terms of cap, but think kind of emotionally about the players in their respective markets. McDavid is frustrated and has been for a while.
Oh, so if we're talking frustration levels, Edmonton is still in a better spot.
Yeah, that's fair. But, they're...
The Leafs players have only been on the team for a handful of years. The fans have been there for decades.
2 years left of Draisaitl, 3 years left of McDavid, but they are also in a bind. What do you do? Because a second round exit is a failure this season.
How
for the
long
Oilers.
has Connor
Oilers.
McDavid and Leonard Draisaitl been on that team? And what do they have to show for it? One conference final? That's a disaster.
Yeah, the Oilers.
I mean, you had Chiarelli for a little bit of that, so I will, give you some leeway on that.
Well, I mean, Ken Holland also decided that Jack Campbell and Stuart Skinner was a Stanley Cup goaltending tandem. But the thing with Edmonton is their problems are simpler. I don't think there's a lot of holes on the Oilers roster, and I don't think there were a lot of performances in the playoffs that the Oilers were disappointed in outside of their goaltending. I think you get Edmonton a proper goalie for these playoffs. They're in the conference finals right now because, and the second round, and this is why I hate this playoff format, for the Oilers is unacceptable. You could very easily have yesterday morning made an argument to me that the two best teams left in the playoffs were the Golden Knights and the Oilers.
Oh, that
could have been a cup final in a different playoff format.
That has conference finals written all over it.
So the fact that the Oilers are out in the second round is bad, but the fact that they lost to the Golden Knights isn't entirely unacceptable. Edmonton was the 2 seed. The Golden Knights were the 1 seed. They lost to the better team. They were the underdog in that series. So
yeah, but try telling that to fans who have the 2 best players in the world.
No, don't get me wrong. You have McDavid, Draisaitl, Hyman, Nugent Hopkins. You should be winning Stanley Cups every year.
Well, they have the 3rd and 4th after Jack Eichel and Matthew Tkachuk right now.
But yeah, I think Edmonton has a little more time and their problems are a little more obvious, which in theory sounds like a worse thing, but in reality it's a better thing because the solutions are a little easier.
Their cannon to shoot Darnell Nurse into the sun is a little bit closer than Toronto, just based on tilt of the earth.
$9.5 million until 2030.
That is
wow.
It was bad at the time. It's bad now.
It's worse now.
Like I just don't. I understand that
as a team who's used to anchors.
Like, remember the summer of 2016 when Steven Stamkos just set off this cataclysmic chain of unfortunate events for a lot of NHL teams? That's what the Seth Jones contract did for the defense market.
Oh, yeah.
yeah, you're exactly right.
Someone had to sign Seth Jones.
I want to talk about this slash, and it's irrelevant now because Vegas won the series in 6 games, but Alex Pietrangelo at the end of a game came in and gave Leon Draisaitl a, coming from the top.
Ogie Oglethorpe would have been impressed.
Chopped down to Draisaitl's hand/wrist. I saw that and went, that's got to be 3 games.
Wow.
I honestly think minimum 2, and I can understand it with the way the league operates, but minimum 2, and I would give that 3 games.
Darnell Nurse got suspended for an instigator from that, right?
That's the same game.
He got a game,
yep.
And they could have rescinded that, right? Because
the
rule is if you get an instigator with like 5 minutes left, it's an automatic 1-game suspension.
Yep.
The league rescinds that stuff all the time.
Yeah. This regular season, I might have the number wrong, but I know I'm at least close. There were 3 instigator penalties given in the last 5 minutes of a game with the automatic suspension. Every single one of them was rescinded.
Okay. And so Pietrangelo also, I thought for sure if Darnell Nurse is getting 1, Pietrangelo is getting
2.
1 + 1.
Yeah.
N + 1, basically.
I thought they would do the same thing, but instead they made them. They just,
what are we doing? How many times do I have to say, what are we doing here?
This league is a joke. And Friedman had the best line on this in terms of describing it. He's like, if it feels wrong, it's wrong. Because what Darnell Nurse and Alex Pietrangelo did are not equivalent.
No.
They're not in the same stratosphere. They're not on the same planet.
I'm pretty sure that fight was agreed to before the puck dropped. Like, there's an argument that should have been rescinded. I have no problem with them leaving it in place. Red Wings fans don't need to be talked about, rescinding the instigator suspension. But yeah, that was wrong. You can never chop a guy like that, but chopping a superstar, the most important player for that team, arguably in the playoffs, as the game was ending, like the justification that was talked about was the league didn't want to take Pietrangelo out that deep into the playoffs for that long.
That is the stupidest reasoning I've ever heard.
But the people who are saying that are right. Like, I don't want...
Like, that's the basis of their decision making.
Yeah, people are saying this is the NHL Department of Player Safety line of thinking. They thought that Nurse Pietrangelo was an even trade-off. It wouldn't affect the series. They didn't want a superstar like Pietrangelo out. And like the people who were saying this were getting roasted. They're right. That was 100% what the Department of Player Safety was thinking. Now, what they were thinking was wrong, bad, and stupid, which is why that entire department needs to be cleaned out. Because an attempted amputation 5 seconds after the play against one of the best players of this generation is worth 1 game. I don't care if it was Alex Pietrangelo who slashed him or Adam Ernie. That player's should be done for the series at a minimum. Like, really, truly, I don't think enough people are actually taking into account what that play was. Draisaitl shot the puck at the empty net, missed. The play continued. What felt like an eternity went by. Then Alex Pietrangelo came by with his stick over his head. Like he was literally chopping wood and chopped Leon Draisaitl nowhere near his stick. Like, this is attempt to injure 101. This is Pietrangelo trying to take a guy out of his series. And a lot of people are saying, hey, the Oilers have been taking liberties with Pietrangelo all series, and he had every right to be as angry as he was. You're right. They were taking liberties with him. He had every right to be angry, and he should have inflicted as much pain on the Oilers as he could. Legally. No.
I'm stabbing him in the eye with the end of my stick. I don't care.
Like, like, you can't... Sebastian Aho, Marty Necas, if Dallas makes it through Robertson, if Seattle makes it through Beniers, whatever, these players now have targets on them to say, yep, if you're a really good player and you want to hurt one of the other team's really good players, you'll get maybe a game. I've not, like, some people said, oh, old-time hockey. No, this isn't old-time hockey. Old-time hockey is not officiated in this league anymore. That's not the style this league is in anymore. That's not the way suspensions are called. It's not a surprise because it's the Department of Player Safety and they miss so damn often, but 1 game is a joke. 2, it's funny because of the difference between 1 and 2. I would have said 2 is a joke, but I understand it within the scope of how this league operates. It should have been 3 for me.
If you believe in the old saying 1 playoff game is worth 2 regular season,
give it 2.
Sure, fine. I don't buy that. Like, if you believe that playoff games are worth more, then yeah, 2 is probably in the range of acceptable. Not for me, but we're close. But the one thing that came out of this incident that I want to talk about is the whole new respect I have for Draisaitl and Nick Bjugstad. Because in Game 6, they both like got near Pietrangelo and just wound up for this big fake slash, like they were gonna like they had no intention of slashing Pietrangelo, but they wound up like they were
shit, and I love it.
I love it. Bjugstad just standing there in the scrum, like with the eyes wide, stick over the head.
Yeah.
Like, this is Daniel Alfredsson pretending to throw a stick over the glass after the Sandin thing, like levels of petty. And my God, I put it right into my veins. I need more of this shit. I love it. I don't love what Pietrangelo did, but I love the Oilers' reaction to it there.
Anyhow, Vegas gets a last laugh here as they move on. And none of this is to take away from how impressive they've been, which is incredibly impressive. So kudos to them. We'll see how the Dallas Stars and the Seattle Kraken shake out as they head into Game 7. But these playoffs, we're potentially looking at an all-expansion conference final.
Oh, prepare for those old hockey men articles.
I think, boy, people are going to be very mad at that. But I think it's great content for the league. I
love it.
Florida Carolina is going to be interesting. I am disappointed to not see Connor McDavid play further into the playoffs yet again. I think that's
should have been better.
Should have won. Yeah, it's on Edmonton.
Be better.
Actually, Connor McDavid, 20 points through 12 games is,
be better.
I mean, the old hockey men articles are going to be off the charts regardless of the outcome tonight, because if it's Seattle, Vegas, the expansion rules were unfair. Maybe they weren't unfair. Maybe just this is exposing how bad half the NHL GMs are at their jobs. Or it's Dallas, in which case the final 4 markets for the National Ice Hockey League are Las Vegas, Dallas, Texas, Florida, Carolina.
Some beautiful weather.
That's
My
the Gary
God.
Bettman, signature right there.
That is some beautiful weather. Okay, very quick update that I want to mention here. The Toledo Walleye, partially on the backs of Sebastian Cossa, are moving on in the Kelly Cup playoffs. They're facing the Idaho Steelheads in the conference finals, or the third round. Sebastian Cossa, four games played, 4 wins, 1.25 goals against average, a .954 save percentage. Has only let in 5 goals on 109 shot, or on 114 shots. So
That is outrageous.
yeah, between him and Letherman, they continue to get some really good support. Toledo. So, and their defense is also outstanding.
One point I want to make on that, because I've seen a lot of talking points, because obviously not a ton of people watch the ECHL. You know, the excuse for Cossa while he's playing behind a stacked team, which is true, it's probably at least worth mentioning that his numbers are far superior to Letherman, who's been playing behind the same team. So Cossa, at least we can directly compare to one other ECHL goalie who he is. And here's the thing, Letherman's playing well. I think he's got a 920 something, and Kossa's light years ahead of him still.
Yeah, Letherman has, I believe, a 925 it was. So, yeah, Cossa has risen to the task. He's done all he can do in that net. If you want to talk about, he has a Carolina-style defense ahead of him. I mean, yeah, you can't change that. Yeah, 925 and 225 goals against average. So, you mentioned this earlier in the episode, Brad. We've seen what we've wanted to see from Cossa in the ECHL this season. And this playoff run is really, it can only be good for his development. Okay, we are going to jump into overtime on this episode of the Winged Wheel Podcast, which is proudly brought to you by our Patreon supporters. Again, patreon.com/Winged Wheel Podcast. If you want to get access to our bonus episodes, all of our giveaways being automatically entered, and of course, getting access to the Winged Wheel Podcast Discord. And then you support the Jamie Daniels Foundation, our expanded content universe with Expected by Whom, and lots more. So patreon.com/Winged Wheel Podcast. Oh, and later in the offseason, when we go down to 1 episode a week, patrons still get 2 a week with some bonus content. Cody Stark, we're going to take some questions. Cody Stark says, are these Jack Adams winners really that good, then all of a sudden that bad a year or two later, or do the voters from the Professional Broadcasters Association really not have much to vote on other than comparing wins to the roster available? More or less thinking out loud, but I would love your takes. Maybe they should let the GMs or coaches or associate head coaches vote on it. They probably have a better idea of what other coaches are doing to be worthy of the award.
It is literally just the team that did better than we expected award. That's all it is. 100% that's what it is. So I don't think here's the problem with coaching. You really can't do much beyond that, because the actual intricacies of coaching are A, behind closed doors for the most part.
Yep.
And B, very hard to visualize on the ice depending on the level of talent on their roster.
There's no goals above replacement quantifiable stat or anything like that for coaching.
Yeah. The reason it becomes team that does better than we expected award is because there's not many other metrics to be able to judge a coach on. Like John Cooper has never won a Jack Adams.
Yeah, that's this year's Mike Babcock.
The Jack Adams is a kiss of death.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, again, it's just for a little context.
And I think it's also a function of coaching is so fickle in the NHL. Like, it is one of the most short-term positions. If you have a long-term coach, it's a rarity in this league. So I see that award, if you think about awards as having a problem, how serious you take it, it has a problem the same way the Norris Trophy has a problem where it overvalues offense for a award that is based on defense.
Shut up, nerd.
Yeah, I know. I'm just, it's something near and dear to my heart, which I know I'm going to be shut up nerded about for the rest of my life. Matt says, between the two, who do you think would be more likely to leave their current team after their contract expires, Matthews or McDavid? That's a fantastic question.
I'm going to say Matthews.
I'm going to go McDavid.
I'm going to say McDavid too. But I don't totally know why.
But you know what? McDavid's going to make $1 trillion wherever he goes. Money's not going to be an issue. I think he's been frustrated for a long time. Matthews, I think is still like there's a big risk of him going for sure. You know, being from Arizona, they're probably going to have the cap space and the want for him. But he has it made. Like, he's in a premier NHL market. He loves doing that. And he has something that even amongst superstars is hard to find, which is he scores goals. He didn't as much this year, and that was a rarity. So I think, the Leafs are likely to pay the premium for him. Playoff results be damned. You don't just let that walk away. So I think McDavid's frustrations will probably be a little bit more significant than Matthews in this hypothetical.
So I'm going to ask you one quick question that kind of is what I'm basing my answer on. If, hypothetically, either of them were to win a cup with their team, would they likely then stay with that team?
Well, Toronto would be burnt to the ground, so I'm not sure that would be possible.
But in the hypothetical, so if Matthews wins a cup with Toronto, do you think he signs an extension with Toronto?
Yes.
If McDavid wins a cup with Edmonton, do you think he signs an extension with Edmonton?
Definitely, yes.
Cool. McDavid's got 3 more kicks at the can. Matthews has 1.
That's fair. Yeah, that's fair. I think these are...
There's also a likelihood that neither resign.
Yeah, that might honestly be my guess.
Gary Bettman is lighting every candle in his house, praying for the chaos of Matthews. If Matthews going to Arizona to save them and McDavid moving to the Eastern time zone.
He just goes to Toronto.
Honestly, maybe.
Bettman might pay them an extra $1 million per year out of his own pocket to make that happen.
I know people don't like it, but if McDavid moves, Toronto is...
I mean, everybody's lining up.
We're going to try to get him on the podcast.
Yeah, that's going to be the Red Wings sweetener.
The last time a player of that caliber has moved was Wayne Gretzky. So just to put that into context.
That's an actual literal statement.
Dylan Larkin's Nana says, who has a higher offensive upside, Pietrangelo or Lombardi? Fantastic question. I think more uncertainty, but higher upside, Pietrangelo for me.
I agree.
Agreed.
But that's a tough one. Babe Landeskog says, would you rather poach players from the Jets, the Leafs, or the Oilers? Also, would you rather the Wings manage to steal Meier or Bratt from the Devils?
I would love either of them from the Devils, so I'm not going to pick. If I had to pick who to pick players from, I'll take a Connor McDavid. Thank you.
Yeah. If you're talking like Nuge, then, I don't know, really. It depends on what the price would be.
It depends on the likelihood here. But that wasn't asked, so I'm asking for McDavid. Thank you.
It's an interesting question.
Winnipeg's the only one that's going to do that.
Yeah.
But
either Meier or Bratt would be great from the Devils. I know Meier had questions about how he performed, but I don't think that's indicative of who he is.
He really heated up towards the end of that series. It's just the rest of his team didn't.
Andy says, I might be drinking the Kool-Aid, but after seeing so many teams with first overall players get knocked out early, I feel even more encouraged that the team Yzerman is building will have success. World-class management is a more significant difference maker at times. We have so many a-hole type players that once they mature, we're going to be a tough team to play against all year. Harks back to what we were talking about, which is that's what you need to do. And also, first overall picks don't have a lot of success in this league.
Yeah, but when was the last time a team without one has won a cup? Like, isn't it like 30 years?
It's top 2 pick, and I think St. Louis is the only one to have done it since the Hurricanes in
Okay, so
06.
You still need a superstar.
It can be done, but yeah, it's uncommon. I don't know if I'm exactly correct.
Anyhow, it is a good point. We have time for one more question here before we wrap up. The St. Louis Blueth. I don't know why that name is so funny. Huh. Seeing Pronman speculate there's a real shot Michkov falls to 6 to 10 range, you got to think Yzerman would push all the chips in to grab him, right? Would it take 9 and 17 to get it done and move all the way to 6? More? Cheers, boys. Depends on how the board falls, right? And how those teams value the players. Because I think Michkov at 6 versus, a team who values Reinbacher at 6, for example, those are going to cost different things.
Yeah. I think the team at 6 is hoping that happens.
Yeah.
No?
They're going to put a big premium on it, and it begs 2 questions. Why would they do it? And 9 and 17 is tempting. Whether you think that's enough, I don't know. It makes me uncomfortable, so it's probably within the range. I have advocated a lot over the past few weeks, and I stand by it that Detroit has to start overpaying to make these moves. Would it get done? Yeah, maybe. Would you do it, though, to move up 3 spots?
If nobody else is calling, then
they're going to get a million. Of all the times a team at 6 would get calls, it's if Michkov is there.
Yeah, and that's why I think it's probably not enough.
At which point you
if
have
nobody
to think,
calls and that's the only offer and they're not all that high and on Michkov and the uncertainty with all that, then maybe they say yes, but I would imagine the caller ID will be exploding.
So you're on a different train than Brad and I, which is that we would get Michkov at all costs, and you're not so hot on the uncertainty in the 3 years.
Oh, I don't think, you know me, I don't think the Red Wings are going to be good in 3 years. So I would have no problem with them taking it. It's just, I think everyone would be calling and the cost would be outrageous.
I will say, I know a lot of Russians have just signed, but whenever you get like the biggest name Russian players, you do have to think, how will Vladimir Putin feel about this? Which is, not something that often goes into scouting reports.
What are his thoughts on sports washing? That might help.
Not easily digestible, I'll tell you that.
3 years, it might not even matter. So we'll see.
Okay, we're going to wrap up this episode of the Winged Wheel podcast. Thank you all so much for tuning in. Again, this week is going to be a bit adjusted. Next episode is going to come out on Thursday. We'd like to thank all of our listeners, our name-level supporters on Patreon, especially Arjun Shankar, Yves Bartels on behalf of the Sarah Grand Foundation, Aikfer, Leafs in 9, Nick Perks, We Are Geelong, the greatest team of all, Glenn Brabham, The Hat 123, Keenan O'Donohue, Yanni Burgers, Meals on Wheels, Matthew M. Rice, Croner's Left Knee, Admiral Matt S. of the Cheesebag Navy, Babe Landeskog, Bros Before Hosas, Carl, Brutina Nanaluski, Chimmy, Chris P., Citizen High Five, Connor Scovey, Cookin' with Cossa, Coyote Season Tickets in Tempe, Denny's Gamer Girl, Jarek Enstam, DJ Denton, Give Blood, Fight Probert, Hockeytown Matt, Hassam Al-Qassem, Jay Gollum, Jacob Turner, Joel Miranda, Kalen Wood, Kevin James, King Tone, Lobster Serenade, LOL, Lobsinger, Get It, Haha, Got Him, effing nerd, Marcus, Matt McKay, Michael Edlund, R.A., Red 3, Ryan Hubbard, Ryan, the Ryan Hannah, Scott Martin, That's What I Appreciates About You, Wallman's Elite Dancing D, General Andy Bohan of the Cheesebag Army, Sam Bankson, #1 Detroit Red Guys fan, A.A. Ron, Adam Gowitzka, Brian Vasha, Adam Rose, Brad Simmons, Captain Antonio Gracias of the United Federation of Cheesebags, C.J. Wilkinson, Commander Ben Barron of the Cheesebag Space Force, Connor Leighton, Corey Prida, Darren Fick, Dungeon Master of Puppets, Frank Stanley, Gene Sullivan, Grand Rapids Hockey Guy, Griffey Boy, I Can't Decide on My Next Patreon Name, Instructions Unclear, Cheesebag No Longer Fresh, James Laporte, Jeremiah Dobo, J.M. Rhapsody, John Evans, John Ingalls, Josh Yelton, Kevin McCracken, Quaz, Linda Hull, Matt Keeler, Maximilian, Melissa Erickson, Ophelia, Steven, Tatar Sauce, the Hodag, the Honorable Sir Poopy Pants of the Poopbag Army, and the St. Louis Blueth. Thank you all so much, and we'll talk to you Thursday.
Thanks for tuning in to the Winged Wheel Podcast. Be sure to check out wingedwheelpodcast.com, where you can subscribe to the show on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. You'll also find links to other ways to support the show, such as Patreon, official podcast apparel, and more. And don't forget to follow the show on Twitter at Winged Wheel Pod. And of course, the hosts at Brad Crisco, at Ryan Hanna WWP, and at Hockeytown Evan.